Good evening all and welcome. Tonight I'm going to be taking you to the cemetery for a chilling collection of true scary stories. But before we begin, this video has been sponsored by Dossier. They sent me some of their perfumes and I was extremely impressed with the quality of the scents, and my favourite so far has been Woody Sandalwood, which is inspired by Santal 33. The original costs £172 and the Dossier one costs $22 with the current sale price. You'd be mad to miss it. So make the most of up to 50% off with Black Friday sales, and there will be discounts going on until December 15th. So it's the best time to stock up on holiday gifts. Link down below. But for now, it's time to get comfortable and let the darkness take control. When I was in high school, I often used a shortcut when I was running late. It was a short path which went through a cemetery. One evening, I felt a cold chill run down my spine when I was walking through there, and it felt like someone had whispered in my ear. It scared the hell out of me, so I ran for it. Later, I managed to convince myself that it must have just been my imagination, but that night, I was proven wrong. Something had started. I woke up in the middle of the night to see a woman standing beside my bed. The moment I saw her, I was instantly paralyzed. I wasn't able to move anything except my eyes, so I kept my eyes on her. She was wearing modern-day clothes and she had short hair. She was looming over me from the side of the bed, and she was grinning. I could see the whites of her eyes, and her teeth lurching out of the darkness. It was utterly terrifying. I think at this point I lost consciousness, because when I opened my eyes again, it was morning. Well, if that would have been the end of my experiences with the smiling apparition, then I would have considered myself lucky. But sadly, there was more to come. The next night, I woke up again and saw that woman. I tried to shut my eyes and look away, but when I did that, she started whispering. I tried a different tactic. I repeatedly told myself that it was just a dream, but doing so didn't make it any easier. It just mentally exhausted me. This happened the next night and the next. I think that I was noticeably different during that period because my parents, classmates, and teachers were all seemingly worried about me. I even saw looks of sympathy from strangers cast my way. I doubled down with my stubbornness and told myself that it was just a dream and that I had the power over my dreams. Each day, I would prepare myself for my nightly battles, but I kept the nightmare woman to myself. I just told anyone who asked me that I was having trouble sleeping. I think that I couldn't bring myself to admit that it was happening. I stopped being stubborn around the 4th or 5th day. I didn't have much left in me. I was thinking of going to my parents with my problem, but that night, a savior appeared at my house. My cousin. My cousin was going to spend the night. He lived in a different town and he was older. He wanted to go see some museum or exhibition or something in our area, and that's why he was spending the night with us. Despite him being older, he always had time for me and wanted to play games with me. I was far too tired to be of any entertainment to him though, and that made me sad. He asked me what was going on and if I was okay. I told him my standard excuse, that I hadn't been sleeping well. He said that he had a fix for me. When it was time for bed, he said he'd punch me in the face to knock me out and I could finally sleep. He was of course kidding and it made me laugh, and it actually helped me relax a little more. I had started dreading the night since the beginning. When the sun began to go down each day, I would slowly and surely become incredibly anxious, so it was great to have him with me. To be honest with you, that night I slipped into a sound sleep. It was like the first decent sleep I had slept in a very long time. But then right on schedule, I found myself waking up at nighttime. This time it wasn't because I sensed the presence of the woman, but a more natural reason, me needing the bathroom. I wanted to wake up my cousin because I was still worried about the woman, but I couldn't hold it any longer. I had to get up. I left my bedroom and headed down the hall towards the light switch. It must have been only around 5 or 6 paces away. Then before I knew it, the woman was right next to me. My body froze in place, and then my neck turned against my will to face her. She wasn't smiling this time. Now, she looked furious. A range of emotions ran through my body. I went from outrage to fear. I thought that I could have died right there in the hallway. Just as I was considering that it might be the end for me, the lights came on. I saw my cousin there. He must have woken up to use the bathroom too. I don't remember much of what happened next, but I think he was concerned for me. The second the light came on, the woman disappeared. I think he didn't see her. But when I got back to sleep, I slept soundly for the first time in a long time, and I felt completely at ease when I woke up too. My cousin woke up a little after me, and the first thing he said to me was, "I had a nightmare." In his nightmare, he was being strangled by a short-haired woman who smiled the most twisted smile he had ever seen. He woke up to see a woman in the room peering over him, wide-eyed with her hands around his neck. He had basically seen and experienced what I had. He said at one point he was briefly freed from the binds of sleep paralysis, and that at that point he asked her questions. If she was a family member or a friend of someone who lived here. He asked her if she was a ghost, but didn't get a reply. And because she wasn't saying anything and still strangling him, he hit back. And he said he hit as hard as he could. She was straddling him and he kept hitting. He closed his eyes, he was running out of oxygen. And then suddenly he felt no pressure around his neck. He opened his eyes and the woman was gone. He then went to sleep, which for me is pretty shocking. I told him about my experience and said that I believed that the woman was a spirit that latched onto me during my walk through the graveyard. He replied that he wasn't sure if it was a ghost or not, but he definitely hit something. He believed it was a bad dream and nothing more. He thought he might have punched the wall or something, but my cousin had a bruise on his neck the next morning. And if they're unrelated, then that's one hell of a coincidence. Maybe it was all a dream, but the fact that it happened to both of us has me doubting that. Thankfully, that was the last time I ever saw the smiling woman. By the way, I read online that if you ever have sleep paralysis, you can get out of it by clicking your tongue repeatedly. Just thought it might help someone. This is a story my great-grandfather used to tell. Though it didn't happen to him, it happened to his cousin. I believe the young man was in his early 20s when this all took place. Back then, the end of the harvest season was a big deal. Everyone his age worked long, exhausting days in the field. But when the work was finally done, they celebrated hard. Each evening they'd gather outside, light a huge fire, share food and drink, talk or dance late into the night. It was a simple celebration, and a kind that people looked forward to every year. My great-grandfather's cousin always stayed until the very end of these gatherings, usually getting home well past midnight, sometimes close to 3 in the morning. His home wasn't terribly far, but the road that circled around the village fields were long. The shortcut ran straight through the old cemetery, and since he was a confident, brave young man, he almost always took the shorter path, even in the dead of night. The first night he was walking through the cemetery as usual when he noticed someone behind him. When he turned slightly, he saw a girl trailing him at the distance, a beautiful young woman wearing what looked like a wedding dress. He'd never seen her before, and it struck him as strange to see anyone, let alone a bride, walking alone in a graveyard at that hour. Still, she made no move towards him, so he kept walking until he reached home. The next evening, after another long day and another celebration around the fire, he headed back around 3 a.m. Out of habit, he cut through the cemetery. And again, the same woman appeared behind him. But this time, instead of keeping her distance, she began to slowly walk towards him. He didn't speak to her or slow down. He simply kept going, uneasy but refusing to show it. He made it home without incident, though he felt watched the entire way. On the third night, the celebrations continued as usual. His friends joke, drank, laugh. No one else noticed anything strange. When he finally left and stepped into the cold, early morning air, he chose the cemetery path again. though something in him hesitated this time. He hoped the girl wouldn't be there, but she was. Only now, she wasn't dressed like a bride. She wore a long, black dress, darker than the shadows around her. She stood completely still at first, and when he realized it was the same woman, a chill ran through his body, and he quickened his pace. Then she began to move fast, faster than before, and he broke into a run. She did too. As he neared the gate, she caught him. Her face was no longer beautiful. It was twisted into something grotesque, almost unrecognizable as human. She grabbed him, leaned close, and in a voice that he never forgot, said, "You will come with me." He was so terrified, he couldn't speak, only shook his head to say no, over and over, violently. Just then, as the sky began to pale with morning light, a rooster crowed from one of the nearby houses. The moment that sound echoed across the cemetery, she vanished. He stumbled home shaking, still unable to stop moving his head from side to side. Years later, my mother actually met this man. Even as an older man, he still shook his head like that, small involuntary movement while retelling the story. He insisted until the day he died that the girl in the cemetery had been real. I work in construction and have done for the past 14 months. It's been at a cemetery in the outskirts of Tucson, and people expect me to have ghost stories by now. Honestly, it's mostly just dirt and stone. No shadows or voices, it's just a job. But some years ago, before I ever worked with the shovel, something happened that I still can't quite explain. Back then, I was dating someone who was deep into the paranormal. As a matter of fact, she worked behind the scenes on one of those ghost hunting shows. I can't actually remember which one specifically, but she always had her gear with her. The voice recorders, EMF readers, thermal cams. I wasn't a believer, but I liked how passionate she was, and I was always down for a creepy experience. We were living in LA, and one Saturday, she suggested a trip to Forest Lawn Cemetery in Glendale. It's this massive place where a lot of Hollywood legends are buried. I agreed. I've always had a weird fascination with old horror movies and wanted to visit Bela Lugosi's grave, the original Dracula. We got there in the late afternoon. It was peaceful. There were a few landscapers in the distance, and otherwise it felt like we had the whole place to ourselves. We found Lugosi's marker. It was simple. She didn't take out a recorder, and we stood in silence for a bit. It felt like visiting someone who had long since found peace. Then, off to the side, we noticed a mausoleum unlike the others. It was tall and narrow, all black stone, with dramatic carvings of theatre masks, comedy and tragedy, but twisted in a strange way. The smile was stretched unnaturally, the frown looked like it was screaming, and between them, carved into the stone, was a name neither of us recognized. Jonathan Blake. Turns out he was a ventriloquist and stage performer in the 1940s and early 50s. Not famous, more of a cult figure amongst those into weird vaudeville acts. He toured the country with a dummy called Mr. Bixby, a grinning, wide-eyed thing with big teeth and a cracked porcelain face. According to forums and old newspaper clippings, Blake's act got darker over time, became more disturbing than funny, and audiences reported hearing voices when the dummy's mouth wasn't moving. One woman even had a panic attack during a show and claimed Mr. Bixby winked at her. And in 1952, Blake was found dead in his apartment, strangled, with the dummy lying beside him. It gave us both a chill. Of course she wanted to record. She pulled out her device and stood right in front of the mausoleum. "Is there anyone here who'd like to communicate?" Nothing. We didn't stay much longer. The sun was going down and the cemetery was closing. We walked back to the car, got in, and started the hour-long drive home. About 30 minutes in, she played back the audio. The recording from Lugosi's grave was empty, just wind. But when we got to the Blake mausoleum, we heard something. She asked, "Is there anyone here who would like to communicate?" And there was a pause, and then, clear as if it had been spoken from the back seat, "Yes." It was a woman's voice, low and drawn out. Not a whisper, but not fully there either. Just this slithering confirmation. I looked at her. "That wasn't you, was it?" I said, shocked. "No one else was there," she said. We played it again, and again, and again. The very same thing every time. There had been no one else around. We hadn't passed anyone. The area had been deserted, except for a few workers far off in the distance. It wasn't her voice. It wasn't mine. And there was no echo, no reverb. Just this voice. She tried to rationalize it. When we got home, she pulled the audio into her software, ran filters, checked for distortions, no artifacts, no glitches, no anything. She ended up using it in a segment of her show, calling it unverified but compelling. I never went on another investigation with her after that. It wasn't fear exactly, more like a realization. The dead might be gone, but some of them might still be around in some way. Years later, working under the sun in dry soil, digging holes for the next row of headstones, I sometimes remember that voice in the recorder. I wonder what else Mr. Blake left behind. It all started when I was in my early 20s. One of my friends moved into a new place, and I went to visit her with a housewarming gift. My friend told me that it wasn't a new place. I didn't expect her first home to be a new place either, and she said that it was old, but when I got there I was taken aback by how old it actually was. We spoke about the house when I met her out front. She said something like, "It's a good-sized place for my family, but my kids are still young. By the time they get a bit bigger, we want to have saved enough to get a different place." It was nice to see her again. I hadn't seen her in a few months, maybe half a year. She didn't live locally anymore. But I noticed there was something different about her. She looked a lot thinner than the last time I saw her, almost emaciated. It was pretty shocking, actually. She had bags under her eyes, and I guess that comes with having children. So I didn't ask her much about that. She gave me a little tour of her home. I looked out one of the upstairs windows and saw that she lived close to a cemetery. My friend caught me staring into it and said to me with a snigger, "Hey, I guess you now know why we got this place for such a great price, huh? It's not exactly prime real estate." There was a note of hesitation in her voice, which she tried to cover up with that joke and laughing about her own circumstances. I wasn't there to judge her. The house was nice in my opinion. Not sure about that view though. I noticed something else. It sounded like they had some noisy neighbors. It looked like a quiet residential area, and I didn't expect the noise. I could hear voices. I guess that's because it was summer, and all the neighbors must have had their windows open. I say to my friend, "Noisy neighbors, huh?" She replied, "What? Not really. Hot though, isn't it?" Guess she must have gotten used to it. But to me it sounded like there was a festival going on out there. I honestly couldn't believe her answer. I tried to pinpoint the source of the noise by craning my head out the window, but I couldn't see anyone. All there was the cemetery. I made sure to keep my composure in front of my friend, but to be honest with you, those voices had to come from somewhere. It sounded like there was a gathering going on, almost as if it was Obon, the national holiday here. It was summer, a little too early for it. It was so weird. The voices I heard sounded like a mix of age and gender, men, women, children, and babies. It was a cacophony of sound. All I could hear were the voices, and yet I couldn't make out a single word that was being uttered. Some of them were softly laughing, others crying. It didn't sound like your standard garden party, to be honest. I really couldn't stand being in the presence of all of that, so I told my friend that I wasn't feeling well. I made something up about heatstroke and went home. I couldn't even make out my friend's reply. I was just so overwhelmed by the raucous sound of the voices I couldn't hear her at all. I noticed that my fingers were trembling as I reached for the latch on her front door to leave. I was honestly more frightened that I had ever been in my life. I couldn't stand it. Even after I had left, I felt as if I could still hear the voices, and I couldn't pull myself together for the longest time that day. I remember that look I had seen on my friend's face, that look of exhaustion. I felt for sure that she had been affected by something in the same sense that I had. I had only been in the house for a matter of minutes, and she had been actually living there. Maybe whatever it was didn't affect her as much as it affected me. Maybe she just felt more tired and didn't see or hear anything weird. I wondered if I should come clean with her and told her the truth behind why I left so quickly. I mean, could I really do that and sound like a sane person to her afterwards? It seemed only to be me who could hear the voices and not her. I wrestled with that choice for a few days, then weeks, and about a month later, I gave her a call to see how she was doing. I didn't plan on telling her what happened to me, but I did. It just came rushing out of me. To my surprise, she said, "Of course." She seemed to be aware of some kind of presence as well as her family. She said she'd been feeling depressed and incredibly lazy since she moved there. In addition to her newborn child, her twins had been inconsolable most nights. Something was up with the children. She spoke with her husband and pleaded with him to move. He agreed, which is a bit of a shock as he's probably the most stubborn man I've ever met in my life. They ended up moving, and I visited them with a brand new moving in gift, and knocking on their front door, was greeted by my friend who looked so much better than the last time I saw her. There was a brightness about her and a glow that I hadn't seen in a while. I learned then that if you rent houses, to not be swayed by cheap prices, because you never know where you pay in other ways. Back when I was in high school, I used to spend every long vacation from school at my cousin's house. His place was way out in the countryside, so it was always super quiet, especially at night. We'd spend our days hanging out, and our nights gaming until the early hours of the morning. It was kind of our thing to stay up late playing video games together. We'd usually stock up on snacks and drinks ahead of time, so we didn't have to go out. As I mentioned, my cousin lives in a pretty rural area, so even the nearest convenience store was a half-hour walk away. There was nothing much around, just field, woods, and a graveyard. One night, we were deep into our usual gaming session when we realized we were running low on drinks. My cousin, being the competitive guy he is, suggested that whoever lost the next game would have to go out to buy more drinks as punishment. I agreed, figuring it wouldn't be me. But of course I lost, so I ended up being the unlucky one who had to go get drinks in the middle of the night. I didn't even know where the vending machine was, so my cousin quickly scribbled a hand-drawn map for me. It wasn't exactly a detailed one, just some rough directions with the cemetery marked as a landmark. It was around 2 a.m. when I finally set out, not exactly thrilled about walking through the countryside alone at that hour. That night was eerily quiet, and the only light came from the dim street lamps scattered here and there. I was following the map, trying to stay focused on reaching the vending machine. The path led me right past this old graveyard, which my cousin had marked as a major landmark. The cemetery was pretty big, with rows of gravestones casting long shadows in the moonlight. I didn't want to stare too much at it. It was pretty creepy, so I just kept walking. I wasn't able to keep my eyes off the graveyard though. Before I knew it, I was looking over towards the graveyard again. That's when I noticed something weird. As I was passing the graveyard, I caught sight of a figure inside. It looked like a person standing among the gravestones, but something about it was off. At first I thought maybe it was just my imagination, or maybe someone visiting a grave late at night, though that seemed unlikely. The more I looked at it, the stranger it seemed. This figure was taller than any normal person. It must have been over 2 meters tall, towering above the gravestones. I couldn't make out too many details from where I was standing, but the figure was dressed in all white. Its clothes seemed dirty and graying, but I could tell they were once white. It kind of looked like a woman, but it was hard to tell in the dark. Plus, their hair obscured their face. My heart started pounding a little faster, and I quickly turned away, deciding it was better to just get to the vending machine and not think too much about it. I managed to follow the rubbish directions on the map my cousin made for me, and got to the vending machine. I then bought the drinks, and started heading back the way I came. As I passed the graveyard again, I noticed that the tall figure was still there. It hadn't moved. I tried to keep walking, but curiosity got the best of me, so I stopped and stared at it for a while, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. And that's when things get really creepy. The figure turned and looked straight at me. I couldn't see the face clearly, but I could feel it staring at me. My first thought was, oh no, am I about to get yelled at for being out so late? But before I could react, the figure suddenly started running towards me, not just walking, full-on sprinting in my direction. I completely froze for a moment, not sure what to do. The figure's face was twisted into this terrifying expression. It was angry, and it was moving fast. My instincts kicked in and I bolted. I ran as fast as I could, my heart pounding in my chest, and didn't stop or look behind me until I was back at my cousin's house. I was out of breath, sweating, and completely freaked out. I had no idea what had just happened, and to be honest, I didn't want to think about it too hard. Of course, my cousin laughed at me and didn't believe my story. I don't really care about that though. Even now I still get chills when I think about that night. What was that thing? Was it even human? The figure seemed too tall to be a normal person. It had long, black hair that hung down past its shoulders, and as it ran towards me, I remember hearing it muttering something. Maybe it was some kind of deranged person wandering around the cemetery, or maybe it was something else entirely. We'll probably never know. I'm sorry if this story doesn't have a huge twist or satisfying ending, but it was one of those memories that still creeps me out to this day. It's one of those moments where you realize just how quickly things can go from normal to terrifying in the blink of an eye. And every time I think about it, it makes me shiver. It was 2016. I was about 20 at the time. My girlfriend lived in Otisville, New York, a well-known little town for its federal corrections facility. I visited her at her home very often, nearly daily. They used to tell me about the paranormal events that would happen there, including their home, which I never experienced for myself. Their home is very close to the facility itself, literally within walking distance. The prison used to be a hospital mainly known for its work with patients suffering from tuberculosis. A lot of the homes are still there, and the homes used to be houses where many people would all get together and stay in beds, trying to overcome the illness. The house my girlfriend's family lived in had a ghost perceived to be a nurse that everyone saw, including her father. Her father was a very serious man. He spent 15 years in prison earlier in his life and is now a head foreman working for a union in NYC. He told me how he came face to face with this ghost of a nurse, and explained that the nurse looked just as surprised to see him as he was. He told me he ran into his bedroom to get his wife, and he was more afraid than he'd been in his life. And this guy, as you can imagine, had seen a lot of things throughout his life. So one day my girlfriend and I were just driving around her small town very late at night, about 2 to 3 a.m., just hanging out and talking. We get out of the car and begin to walk around. This was around the time when all the videos about clowns stalking and chasing people were common. The whole clown craze of 2016 really had everyone talking. We weren't too scared, as I had a pretty powerful CO2 pellet pistol, which I used to carry around just in case, especially at night. I figured we could go to this town cemetery and explore. My girlfriend hated the area. The cemetery's quite big and covers a lot of the area. As soon as we walked in there was this tree to the right side, and we heard this loud rumble, which sounded like thunder above us. The problem was that it was a clear night with no clouds in the sky. We chose to brush it off and kept walking. In the distance, about 150 to 200 feet away, I see two glowing apparitions. They looked like cliché ghosts wearing white sheets. Eventually, after staring at these things for 2 minutes, they slowly turn around, and they both have glowing white eyes. They stare back and start moving towards us. My girlfriend gets scared and takes a step back. She wants to leave. I tell her to hold on because I want to get a better look. I take a few steps closer and go off the path and into the grass near the headstones. My girlfriend yells at me to get back on the path, and before I even have a chance to look up, I hear shuffling noises like people running. I look back to see 3 dark apparitions, no distinct features, just pitch black bodies with limbs. I don't hear them make any noises like breathing or speaking or anything beside the sound of their bodies running towards me, and I turn around and bolt. As soon as I pass through the entrance gate, which was only about 15 feet away, I turn around and there's no one there. I immediately wonder if someone was playing a prank, like a clown, but there's nowhere to hide. My girlfriend told me that instead of dark bodies, she saw 3 glowing white orbs moving towards me very quickly before she turned around and ran. As we headed back to my car, we were trying to rationalize what we saw and couldn't. I took it back to the entrance and parked it with my headlights pointing into the cemetery. We sat for a few minutes and looked until we saw a small naked toddler run from behind one gravestone to behind another. Once we saw that, I slammed the car into reverse and got the hell out of there. It has to be one of the wildest experiences of my life, and all comes from a town rooted into the history of tuberculosis in New York. Many people suffered and died because of that disease, and it seems like a lot of their spirits are still around haunting that town and its cemetery. This story takes place in my homeland of Kazakhstan. It was winter, and I was 16 years old. That night there wasn't a cloud in the sky, and the moon was so bright that flashlights weren't even necessary for going outside. Everything was perfectly visible. After training, which I ended late in the evening at 9, my friend, who was terrified of the dark, asked me to walk him home. Since it was on my way, I agreed. So we reached his house and said farewell. Near his house, I had to choose the way home. I was lazy, so I chose the shortest route. This would prove to be a fatal mistake, because the road was located between 2 clusters of cemeteries. Just so you understand, there is a cemetery with 5,000 graves on one side, and on the other side, one with 2,000. They're about 300 yards apart, and this damn road I took runs between them. Muslim cemeteries are similar to Christian ones, but ours are surrounded by a 6-foot-high brick wall. Some of these cemeteries have trees growing in them, and there's a grave that even looks like a 20-foot pyramid. I walked along the road, on both sides of the cemetery. I catch myself thinking I see something moving behind the graves. I begin to convince myself it's just my imagination. I walk slowly, constantly looking back. At some point, my attention is drawn to a tree in the middle of the cemetery square. Next to it stands a grave that looks like a pyramid. I can't figure out what's wrong with this tree. I start looking at the other trees, looking for differences. At some point, I found a difference. Leaves, damn it. This tree has leaves on its branches, but others don't. You can see through them, but this one does. In our area, there are no trees with leaves in the winter. I walk on, pondering, trying to explain the logic of this tree. Could it be an evergreen? But at the same time, I can't take my eyes off it. At some point I realize the leaves have become too thick, and it's no longer a tree, but a huge shadow that resembles a tree. I didn't notice how this damn tree turned into a 20-foot shadow, and how its shadow merged with the shadow of the pyramid. I look at it, and realize that this is reality. My steps slow down, and I'm looking into this shadow. I pray that its base will end up in the shadow of the pyramid. My fears turned out to be true. The base of the shadow is between me and the pyramid. The distance between me and the pyramid is about 3 school buses, and this shadow lies in an empty field, and there's no objects nearby to cast said shadow. Imagine a place with nothing. Add snow, and in the middle, a shadow as tall as a 3-story building. At that moment I realized that my body was about to enter a similar state to sleep paralysis. The body does not move, only the eyes look around. You can't speak, you just observe the world around you. And at that moment, I was incredibly curious about what would happen if I took a few more steps towards this shadow. At the same time, I was afraid that it would drag me away and tear me to pieces, and fear of death overcame my curiosity, and without taking my eyes from the shadow, I found the strength to stand up and take a step back, then another, and another. The further I moved from the shadow, the easier it became. I managed to regain my control over my body and leave that place. I will say the following though. If you see a shadow and feel hypnotized or similarly affected, leave immediately. It's hard to explain up to a certain point. I wasn't afraid, but rather curious. I was simply able to assess the situation objectively, and think that's what saved me. Fear of death is definitely the feeling that keeps you from dying, and I advise you to listen to it. My classmates told me a lot about the cemetery. This is one of their stories. When they were 13 or 14 years old, they went to the river on a moped, late in the evening. Their parents called and demanded that they quickly return home because it would get dark. If they didn't return quickly, they would get beat up. So my friends hurried home, got on their mopeds and sped home. On the way there, they passed by a cemetery. As they approached the cemetery, they drove even faster, afraid to stop near one. And as they were riding, they noticed something dark nearby jumping from shadow to shadow at their speed. From the shadow of one gravestone to the next. The next day, they told about it at school, and there was no confusion in their words, as we all knew they'd gone to the river and that their mothers had called them because we went swimming in the river together. Fictional stories told by two people usually have a way of changing. You can tell them apart from real ones. As when it's real, they don't embellish any details. The second story involves me. That winter, my classmate and I decided to go hare hunting. Guess where we were going to hunt? Yep, in that same cemetery. My classmates and I agreed to go hunting on a Sunday morning, since my house was far away and on the other side of the cemetery. They said they'd call me when they got there. So they called and said they'd arrived at the cemetery and asked when I'd be there. I said I'd be there in about 5 minutes, so I left house and went to the cemetery. I knew roughly which direction they would come from. When I got there, I was about to call them and start looking for the hares and head into the direction of the mob, when suddenly I saw them all. They approached me and started freaking out, telling me they saw me and that I didn't answer their call. Since they all started yelling at me at once, I asked them to calm down and slowly tell me exactly what they saw. From what I understand, they came to the cemetery, called me, and started looking for the hares, when suddenly one of them saw me, or rather, part of my head, from behind a gravestone. He thought I was hiding and trying to scare them, which is usually what I do in fairness. He saw me and said to his friend, "Look, he's trying to frighten us." The friend looked at me and shouted, "We see you, you can come out now." But I stood there silently. Then, they all began shouting at me to come out. But I stood there silently and resolutely. Then one of my friends invited the other to come over to me. As they approached, they saw my entire head. My head and the hood on it. They walked around the gravestone, but I wasn't there anymore. I'd simply vanished. They found no tracks in the clean snow. It was undisturbed. They retreated because they thought I was an optical illusion. This time, my head, or anything resembling a head, was no longer visible, and afterwards they looked again at the spot where I'd supposedly been, but there was nothing, not a single track. The snow around the area was untouched. Explanation? It snowed all day on Saturday, and that's why there were no tracks in the cemetery. When they saw me, they asked me to put on my hood and stand in that exact spot. Then they went to the spot where they saw me and said, "Yep, it was definitely you with your hood." I know I freaked them out good and proper, but as you obviously know, it wasn't me. I wonder if a phantom was using my appearance to frighten my friends, or maybe some other end. What do you think? I was about 11 years old when this happened. The town I grew up in had a cemetery right in the middle of everything. It wasn't hidden away or out of town, it was just there, like any other regular landmark. Right beside it was a huge open field where all of us kids used to spend entire summers riding our bikes, setting up makeshift ramps, wiping out and getting back up. Basically all the Gen X stuff that probably should have put us in the hospital but somehow never did. That summer, construction had finally started in that field. After years of being our playground, it was suddenly being turned into a housing development. They finished building one house and were halfway through another when we decided it would be the perfect place to explore one night. We thought we were being brave and rebellious. Really, we were just bored kids. From our backyard, we had a routine path, hop the chain link fence, squeeze through the narrow alleyway between my neighbor's garage and another fence, and run down their driveway, then sprint across the street into the field. We'd done it so many times it felt like a secret mission route. So that night, well past midnight, we made the usual run and headed straight to the almost finished house. Inside, everything was still exposed. No drywall or open frames, raw wood everywhere. The stairs didn't even have proper railings yet, and the place smelled like new lumber. I ran up the back bedroom on the second floor. The window space didn't even have glass yet, so I could look straight out over the field we'd spent our childhood tearing up. And that's when I saw it. Down below, standing in the open field, was this huge dog. At least, that's the closest thing my brain could come up with. But it was massive. Way bigger than any dog I'd ever seen. With thick, fluffy fur like Samoyed or a big husky. It was so out of place that for a moment, I just tried to make sense of it. Then it looked up. We locked eyes, and in that moment it felt like something inside me dropped. It snarled, baring its teeth, and I could see the claws digging into the dirt like it was preparing to launch itself. They were enormous, easily the size of my hand, and when it growled, slobber actually sprayed out of its mouth. That sound hit something primal in me. It wasn't just scary. It was like every survival instinct I had suddenly awoke. I bolted away from the window without even thinking. My buddy didn't even ask questions. He saw my face and just ran with me. We tore down the unfinished stairs, tripping over ourselves and shoving the front door open and sprinting across the street like our lives depended on it, which obviously it did. And I swear I could hear it chasing us. We flew down the alley, scrambled over the fence and slammed through my back door so fast we nearly took it off the hinges. We didn't speak. We just stood there breathing hard, trying to convince ourselves we were safe inside the house. And that was it. No dramatic ending or big discovery, just a terrifying encounter that I've never been able to forget or explain away. Do you think it was because of the cemetery? Had it summoned something to chase us away? I'd love to get your thoughts. This happened a few years ago when I was still married to a guy in the army. We were stationed at Schofield Barracks in Hawaii, and one day we went to Pearl Harbor to pay our respects at the USS Arizona Memorial. I remember feeling quite reflective. It's such a solemn place. We boarded the small boat that takes you out over the sunken ship, and I was standing there looking down into the water. You can still see parts of the wreck beneath the surface. And as I stood there, something strange happened. I started to hear voices. It wasn't just one. It sounded like a few men talking, but I couldn't make the words out. It was faint and muffled, and coming from the direction of the water. My first reaction was to brush it off. Maybe it was the waves. Maybe I was just overwhelmed with emotion. Maybe I was losing my mind for a moment. But then my husband looked at me with a weird expression and said, "Did you hear anything strange?" I froze. I didn't even want to say it out loud, and I just nodded quietly and replied, "Yes, I do." He immediately just said, "Nope," turned around and walked right back to the boat. We cut our visit short. We didn't really talk about it afterwards. He was the type to avoid anything he couldn't explain. But I'll never forget how fast he wanted to leave after I confirmed I'd heard it too. Whatever it was, it filled me with this deep, indescribable sadness that I've never experienced before or since. I don't know what I heard that day. Maybe it was in my head, maybe it wasn't. But if you've ever been to the Arizona Memorial and felt something you can't explain, I just want you to know that you aren't alone. I've always been a skeptical person, and will need a practical explanation before believing anything. That's why what happened in 2009 still bothers me. I can't rationalize it, and that's what makes it stick with me all these years later. Back then, my best friend and I lived in a small town. We weren't 21 yet, so our late-night entertainment options were basically non-existent. One night around midnight, we decided to walk through the cemetery. Back then, my mum was obsessed with ghost hunters, so part of us treated the whole thing like some kind of DIY paranormal experience. We walked slowly between the headstones saying things like, "If there's anyone who wants to make contact, you can show yourselves." And the moment we started saying that, something changed. Out of the corner of my eye on the right, I caught something. It looked like a person dressed in white, running between the tombstones and keeping pace with us. I told my friend and we decided to check it out. We left the paved path and stepped into the darker part of the cemetery. Standing there halfway in, I repeated myself almost as a challenge. "Is there someone or something here that wants to make contact with us?" And I still regret saying that, because right after the words left my mouth we heard footsteps, actual footsteps, slow, heavy and unmistakable, crunching through the frozen grass heading straight towards us. Most people would have bolted, but I was determined to get to the bottom of it, so we stayed. The footsteps got closer, and then it stepped into the moonlight. There was no mistaking it. This wasn't fog, or some trick of the night. It was the disembodied figure of a person. The outline was clear, darker than the night around it, like it absorbed the light instead of reflecting it. We could see the shape of its face, its form, but it was also semi-transparent, shimmering a little as it moved. And it didn't stop. It kept walking directly towards us. When it got within 10 feet, we heard whispering, not words, more like a drawn-out, angry breath. And that's when the courage finally snapped. We ran, and didn't stop until we'd covered 2 miles and made it back to the car. I can't rationally explain any of it. I still try. But I know what I saw, and I know what I heard, and because of that night, I won't go into the cemetery after dark again. I suppose there are certain things there that don't like being disturbed, and some of them will walk right up to you when you call. Probably best to be left alone. This happened when I was 16, almost 30 years ago now, and I still remember it with uncomfortable clarity. That summer, I'd spent most of my time at my friend Matt's house. His parents had both moved out but hadn't sold the place yet, which meant we basically had the run of it. On any given night, there were at least 5 or 6 of us hanging around, and the night this happened was no different. We decided to visit a local cemetery late at night. I don't want to name it because they've had a lot of vandalism over the years, and the place is off limits unless you're visiting a relative. Because of that, we dropped our friend off near the path, then parked the car about half a mile down the main road. Matt and I jogged back to meet them. By the time we caught up, everyone was already nervous, and things only escalated from there. We barely made it onto the cemetery grounds. It felt like every sound was coming from a different direction, and I'm sure being teenagers didn't help, as our imaginations were probably working overtime. But it genuinely felt like we were being watched. We didn't argue about leaving. Everyone agreed instantly. We jogged back to the car and headed to Matt's house a few miles away, and the mood changed fast. Everyone else was laughing and joking around, but I wasn't exactly in great shape emotionally. The short version is that the girl I liked Matt instead, and she was there. So when we got back, I stepped outside to cool off, to give myself a little bit of space. It was around midnight and everything outside was quiet. I stood in the street for a while, just trying to get my head straight, when I turned around and stopped dead. Right in front of me was this mist. That's the only word I have for it. It wasn't low and spread out like normal fog. It was tall and narrow and hovering in place, close enough that I could have reached out and touched it if I wasn't frozen solid. I couldn't move. It didn't move. And for what felt like minutes, I just stared at it, while every hair on my body stood up. My brain didn't even try to make sense of it, just completely instinctive fear. Eventually, I snapped out of it, turned and bolted back to the house. I told everyone what I'd seen, but they stepped outside with me and it was gone. And even though I can't prove anything, I've never shaken the feeling that whatever it was had followed us from the cemetery. It's the clearest paranormal experience I've ever had. I've seen strange things before. I've chalked it up as maybe paranormal, but there was always room for doubt. Not this time, though. I've thought about going back to the cemetery over the years, but as I got older, I learned to respect private property. And honestly, I learned there are some memories you don't need to revisit. Sometimes it's best to just leave the past in the past. I went to Missouri, India, with my friends and walked along the Camelback Road. For those who don't know, it's said to be haunted. While I was there, I heard so many stories from the locals. I'm a curious person and wanted to see if I could feel anything on my own, so we decided to go there around the witching hour. There is a cemetery that is said to be haunted. On the first day, we went around 1 a.m. We were very close when all three stopped at the same time and decided not to go. It was odd, but I didn't think about it at first. But our curiosity didn't die there. The next day around 3 a.m. we went there again. This time we reached there. It was locked and had fences and everything, so we couldn't go inside. We observed from outside. From the lights of the phone, we tried to sneak inside, but it was dark. We came to the front and saw a board outside and read it. The date was mentioned there, along with the details of burials that happened. That cemetery belonged to the British era. There was also a name mentioned of a prominent person buried there, and the book that was written for her. So we decided to take a picture of it, and when we were taking pictures of that board, popped into my mind. No matter what this picture was, it wasn't going to come out clear. I didn't take the picture, my friend did. While we were doing all of this, my friend moved towards the main gate, and I stayed there to read it completely. When I was standing there, I felt someone standing behind me. I moved and there was no one, but you feel when someone is close to you. I felt that same way. Somehow I could see this person. He was in his mid-40s, half-bald, white, wearing baggy pants, like British soldiers used to wear. I didn't say anything there, because I've heard that if they know you can see them, they follow you, and that's the last thing I wanted. So we spent some time there, took pictures, and decided to move on. As soon as we came back, it was almost 4 a.m. We were tired, so we decided to sleep. The moment I was in bed and decided to sleep and closed my eyes, I could see the cemetery gate, and people wanted to come out. It was locked. I opened my eyes and it felt weird. After this, I slept and forgot all about it. We came back when we were exchanging pictures, and I asked for the one of the cemetery, and saw it had a blurry fog to it. We caught ghosts in the camera. We decided not to keep the pictures and deleted them immediately. It made me believe that whatever I felt was certainly real. This one's actually my brother's story, but I've had weird experiences in the same place, so it always stuck with me. He was out fishing alone one afternoon. There was nothing unusual about the spot, except there's a cemetery nearby. Anyway, he was whistling to himself while he finished, just some random tune, but every time he started to whistle he'd hear footsteps, fast ones, like someone running up behind him. He'd stop whistling, then the sound would stop, start again, and there it was, the ever-approaching footsteps. He said he turned around so many times, expecting to see someone, even an animal. There was nothing there. He tried it a few more times, like testing it. Whistle, footsteps, silence, nothing. Every time. Eventually he just packed up and left. It didn't feel right. I felt it too in the same spot. Like something is just watching you. The cemetery isn't big, but whatever is in there doesn't rest easy. I believe it's probably one of the spirits who isn't quite at rest, whose body was laying in the cemetery. What do you think? For a bit of context, about 2 weeks ago, my friends and I decided to check out a cemetery at night. We didn't mean any disrespect. We were just a curious little bunch. During that visit, my friend Aiden and I had totally different vibes. He was acting like a curious kid, wanting to read every single headstone and talking non-stop. Meanwhile, I could barely speak at all. It felt like I was stuck inside my own head, drowning in anxiety for no reason. And every time Aiden stopped to look at a grave, I'd feel this little spike of pain somewhere in my body just seconds before he said anything. It was weird enough that I noticed a pattern. We eventually wandered off the cement path onto this dirt track made by car tires because we wanted to see one specific tombstone. The next day, Aiden said he felt called to go back. I was immediately against this idea. Something in me just said no. Because of that, he decided to go again with the rest of the group but did not invite me. He later claimed he didn't want to annoy me, but around 8 PM that night, I suddenly got this awful feeling like something was off. I checked for his location out of instinct, and sure enough he was about to enter the cemetery. I panicked. I didn't want him going alone, and none of our friends were answering their phones, and I was scared he'd do something disrespectful by accident. When I got there, he wasn't alone. He was with our whole group, including Angel. I stayed because I was already there, but as soon as I started walking through the cemetery again, all the same feelings from before hit me. The anxiety, the tightness in my chest, the weird sensation that I couldn't speak. And this time, it also felt like something was walking right behind me, matching my steps. When we finally left, I didn't get that sense of relief I felt the first time. Instead, I shut down completely. On the way home, I had this heavy ache in my chest, specifically on the left side, like right over my heart. I splashed holy water on myself when I got home, but instead of feeling better, I got overwhelmed by jealousy and fear of abandonment over Aiden inviting everyone but me. I do have abandonment issues, but this was way worse. It got so bad I genuinely wished I wouldn't wake up in the morning. I even thought about cutting myself, and I hadn't had those thoughts in years. Right when I was spiraling, my dad suddenly called me out of nowhere, and then Angel did too, and talking to him actually helped a lot. The whole weight started to lift. Since then, I haven't had the same full wave anxiety, and I'm grateful for it. I'm just wondering if anyone has any insight into what might be going on with me. Do you think perhaps a spirit from the graveyard attached itself to me? And it's only after getting the help from my friends and family that whatever power it held over me managed to lift? Hey guys, it's Mort here, and thank you so much for listening. I really hope you did enjoy tonight's stories. I certainly had fun recording them, and I don't often do this for advertisements, but seriously, these Dacier perfumes smell really good, and they're really cheap. I say this somewhat saltily because I just treated myself in the summer to a £100 perfume, and it turns out they have one that smells just like it for, like 1/5 of the price, so I'm sort of kicking myself now. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me. I really had fun with this one. I will be back on Saturday with Haunted Hotels. All new stories, don't worry, it's not going to be a comp. I think we're going to be doing comps less frequently. I also have plans of doing something which I haven't done in about maybe 8 or 9 years, I'd say, which is the 12 days of Creepmas. I did it from the 1st to the 12th of December, a long time ago, doing a video every day, and I had a lot of fun doing it, trying to get the topics done on time. And then I looked up when the 12 days of Christmas actually were, and it turns out it's from the 25th to the 5th, so I don't know, I might still do it anyway from the 1st to the 12th, just because. Anyway, guys, I'm going to sign off for now. Thanks as always to my members and patrons whose names are on screen now. And if you'd like exclusive bonus content, follow the links in the description to find out more. And there is always free exclusive content on Patreon that you can listen to for free if you want. Just follow the link to find out more. But that's it from me. Stay awesome, guys, and I'll see you in the next one.